We should be live, everybody. And this is my first ever co-stream with these gurus. And we're going to make this very democratic. We're all part of it. There is no quarterback here, although Herbert is normally our resident quarterback. Hopefully he can step in if I drop the ball, or Cern, you've got so much to add. You are my modeling guru. I consider myself a modeler, but you're next level. The stuff you've done with bots is incredible. And the love you've gotten from Elon lately has been incredible too. I got one like to one tweet ever in my life. That was last week after the announcement. But he's all over your channel. And Hans, of course, our resident AI guru. And Herbert, thank you all for coming. And Herbert, you're doing what, 8 streams a day at this stage, which is out of control. I don't know how you keep up. Okay, so we're going to talk about, I'll just roll through this. I want to talk about a couple of big things. Why is this not working? Let me go full screen. Yeah, I'm going to pop up a slide first. We're going to talk about Master Plan Part 4. We don't know what it is. One of the things that Elon did say during the meeting was the fact that it's a new book, not a new chapter. And I think scaling clean energy is one of the things he's always been big on. Solving autonomy, they're 98% there if you ask me. And then create infinite GDP abundance, which is the bot. And of course, solve AGI. This is, there's probably a lot more to Master Plan Part 4. But when he says he's writing a brand new book, when he said that in the shareholder meeting, I was like, oh my goodness, because I have analyzed his master plans in the past. So who would like to chime in on what this master plan could look like first?
Yeah, I'll get started. I think that when you listen to Elon, especially in the last 2 times he's been up, the earnings call, and then especially at the annual shareholder meeting, you're hearing him work out in his head what his next goals are, right? His master plan part 4, it's part of his next compensation plan, but he's talking about actual numbers. He's telling you, here's how many bots, here's going to be the business model. We'll rent it out, we'll sell it. This is how much it's going to cost us. Here's what the price is going to be. Here's what Robotaxi is going to be. In fact, why don't I go and set a date, 8/8, and let me tell you the details of how that is. He's working out everything in detail now, what he's going to see in the next 10 years. And this is so big, so large, such a magnitude change. And he's repeated a few times, right? That ARK Invest is the actual, he thinks that their analysis, you should check them out because their analysis is as accurate as I think that they are. So we'll see what he thinks Master Plan Part 4 is. But on the interview he did this morning, he talked about abundance. And I saw this post by this gentleman named Barry Schiff, and I thought what he did was great. The mission for the next Part 4 could be create a sustainable world of abundance on Earth. And it's going to include real world AI. It's going to include bots. It's going to include the energy and possibly food and cities and other things as well. But definitely bots. Robotics, AI is front and center.
Yeah, and that was the whole pivot. And, you know, the pivot itself makes a lot of sense to me because you can smash your head off a brick wall competing with 100 Chinese EV makers.
Yeah.
Is that really where you want to play? The answer is no. You want to play somewhere different. You always want to pick a market that has more potential, maybe where you have more edge, or there's less ruthless competition that can make cars at a loss. Hans, I see you nodding there. Any thoughts on Master Plan Part 4 and this pivot, this new book?
Absolutely. The core of, what he spent the time talking about on the shareholder day was first autonomy and then bots. And so I think that it's going to be those 2 things in that order are going to be the main focal point of this new master plan part 4. And I was just reflecting on the fact that, in the conversation that I had with James Dowmer recently with Farzad, he was just explaining to us how little Tesla had been able to really utilize the neural net processing chip on hardware 3 that, up until recently, the CPU was still doing most of the work of FSD. And we know that because they had those 300,000+ lines of C++ code that they deleted from the code base. And I think that it shows how much foresight that they had to put a computer that was designed in 2017 into the cars. And I think this is why Elon was, so optimistic about the eventual capability of FSD, and he thought it was going to come sooner. He didn't expect it to take until 2025 to really have neural nets that could take full advantage of the hardware 3 computer. And so on the one hand, I think that's why it's taken us, or why Elon has underestimated the challenge of this problem. But I think we're finally getting to the point where this is now becoming front and center stage. And so now that he sees us being this close to solving autonomy, he wants to really set forth his thinking on the business case for that. And then the bot is just a natural extension out of autonomy. That the first principles approach that Elon has taken to solving FSD is that we have to get the intelligence right, that we're not going to rely on sensor crutches. We have to see the world and navigate the world like an intelligent being would. And if you can solve the intelligence, well, then it's just a natural follow on to say, okay, now let's take that and let's put it in a different form factor. And what's the best form factor that we could start with? Well, it's the general human form. And, this is something that Adam Dorr has been thinking about for a long time. He's the research director at RethinkX and works closely with Tony Seba. And he, along with, James Dalma, have both predicted that the bots are the logical next step after solving autonomy many, many years ago. And so when you think about it in those terms, you realize that this is probably something that Elon has been thinking about also for quite some time. And then that's where we start getting into the incredible modeling that you have done, CERN, and just what is the potential for not only Tesla as a company, but just the world and the world economy and deflation and the possibilities that we have to provide people, of every walk of life with abundant goods and services. And it's just really exciting to think about that. And then I'm not sure what other pieces might be involved in that master plan part 4 in Elon's mind, but those two are obviously the biggest pieces.
And Herbert, you said that one thing is very pertinent, that he left a lot of breadcrumbs around the place. CERN, did you pick up on these quotes from the shareholder meeting? He talked about they are the leader in real world AI. He calls it baby AGI. And then he spoke about hardware 3, hardware 4, and AI 5. And one of the things that was really interesting, we talked about hardware 5, AI 5, that it'll go to 700 to 800 watts. I think the current version 3 is at 100 watts, and then 150, 200. Now 700 to 800 watts. And he spoke about a fleet of 100 million cars. Have you given any thought to what that means? And of course, that is 100 gigawatts of compute. Like he laid it all out bare, every breadcrumb, every step of the way. This is massive on so many levels. How did you interpret this, especially in your modeling, CERN?
Well, I haven't really begun to factor that too much into my modeling. I have done some models for distributed inference for both cars and bots. And by the way, there's a lot of computing power in the bots too, right? The computer is half of what's in the car. So when you start talking about bots in the hundreds of millions or billions, you get to some pretty crazy compute numbers. But just to go back to something we were talking about earlier, in terms of abundance, Elon has been leaving breadcrumbs about this, and he mentioned it today in his interview. He is not talking about universal basic income for anybody. He refers to it as universal high income. And many people that I talk to, when I talk about bots and how the bots have such massive potential, the first thing that people think about is, oh, everybody's going to lose their job and no one will have any income and the economy is going to tank because no one has any money to spend. Elon is very clearly painting a very different view of the world with respect to that. And let me just sort of touch on kind of the basic math of GDP. And Elon's talked about this as well. GDP is simply the labor force times the productivity of that labor force. In our current world, the growth of the labor force is constrained by demographics. It's constrained by birth rates. And it takes us 20 years to have a child, train that child up, and for that person to become a productive member of the workforce, right? So imagine if you can release that constraint and build a bot and have that intelligent bot become an immediate addition to the workforce. You release the constraints that are on GDP growth, right? And everybody is stuck on this idea that GDP can only grow at 2 or 3% a year, and that's it. Bots address the amount of labor and also the productivity of that labor. And so you release that constraint, suddenly GDP can make a step change. Now, how we handle that is another matter. And it's kind of, you get into a little political discussion about how you might handle job displacement and that kind of thing. But at a pure sort of productive level, we will be able to produce everything that humanity needs at a scale that we can barely imagine. And that's what Elon has been talking about. And so I'm hoping in Master Plan Part 4, he articulates that vision more clearly and spells it out a bit more for us in terms of what his vision is regarding that.
Can I ask a question for the group? I suspect that Elon himself has had to revise his projections. Initially, he did talk about UBI. Now he's talking about universal high income. His numbers have just, like you said, CERN, his numbers have keep going up by magnitudes higher. Last year, he said we might have some number of Optimuses in the factory. Now he's saying 1,000, maybe even 2,000. He's talking about $25 trillion market cap. He initially said 1 billion bots in the future. Now he's talking about 2 billion. Sometimes he's like increasing the numbers. Do you guys think that he's actually himself being shocked by the advances? His own chips, he said that hardware 4, everything's going exponential. Everything. Every version of FSD is 10 times better than the previous version. Hardware 4 is going to be 10 times better. And then hardware 5 is going to be 10 times better than that. It's going to be 50 times better by hardware AI 5. Thank you. So, yeah.
Well, first of all, I don't buy into the whole global abundance thing. That's just not the way the world works. I think that's too optimistic. And I don't want to throw a bucket of cold water on the future of abundance. I know it's possible, but I think it's unlikely because, first of all, you have your geopolitics, and you guys know robots better than anybody else. Who's making the biggest investment on the planet? That is the Chinese. 7 of the 10 top companies are now out of China. China has negative birth rate. They know they need this more than anything to grow their GDP. They're going through a world of hurt right now, their economy. So it'll become kind of like a nuclear arms race, but for bots. And that begs the question, why is the US leadership not on bended knee in front of Elon Musk right now? I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. So that's one of the things I think it'll be those economies that have the bots or the technology to be able to ramp up GDP and create abundance will matter. But then who will get all the reward from all that abundance? The answer is, as always, the 0.1% or the 1%. So steel man me, CERN or Herbert.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's a big question in terms of how that is all going to work. Certainly, it is not going to work well if only a few people get the fruits of the spoils, right? It has to be shared in some way, and so the modeling that I've done has shown that bots add an incredible amount of value, or have the potential to add an incredible amount of value. And the question is, how is that shared? Will we, for example, as individuals, have the ability to buy bots and earn income from those bots working? Or is all that income going to flow through companies like Tesla? Right? And if so, the shareholders benefit, and that's great, but that leaves out, millions of other people potentially in terms of that could use that income from the bots for themselves. I think we can look at the Robotaxi network perhaps as some clues. Elon has talked about individuals being able to put their cars in the network. Now, how long that remains an opportunity remains to be seen. I'm in the camp that thinks that one day, eventually, Tesla will stop selling vehicles to people, that they'll just run the Robotaxi network themselves. But maybe not. Maybe Elon is thinking about, how this is going to work long term. and you have to give people an ability to earn an income. And so whether that's owning a robotaxi vehicle that produces income for you, or whether that's owning a bot or a few bots that can produce income for you, I think that remains to be seen.
I want to push back, Søren. You yourself created a financial modeling. We had lots of discussion about the government or companies being taxed. The government taxing companies. You're not going to have a model where consumers are going to be able to have to make money anymore. If that's the whole point, what he's saying. It's the world of abundance. You don't have. He also pointed out in today's interview that the biggest existential crisis would be humans not having a purpose in life. That's what we need to worry about. But the idea being that all these companies make bots, all these companies, like you said, James, is like economic warfare, but they're going to tax the bots. And the amount of money in your forecast, Søren, of just the taxes that the government can get from this, whether city level, state level, or government level, it's so high. It is so high that they could distribute it to every citizen, and you don't ever have to work anymore. That's what he means by universal high income. So I don't think the model is, oh, I need to own my own bot. I'm going to sell my own services. I'm going to make revenue out of it. That's not what we're talking about.
So that is interesting. And I think the taxation will be an issue, but we know what happens with taxation.
Right.
They'll flee, especially on a state-by-state basis. They'll go to non-tax jurisdictions. Then you may have all the bots in Texas or somewhere. Who knows? But by the way, before I forget, we will be doing some modeling. We're going to get some stuff out of the way first, modeling towards the end. And also, I have links below. I don't know, we're streaming on multiple channels at the same time, but if you are on my channel, don't forget to subscribe to Hans and Herbert. But anybody who watches my channel watches these guys anyway. So just a reminder, everybody. So we will get to the modeling first. So there's a lot of stuff to talk about regarding all of this, but let's get into some of the data first. We have a couple of slides to share, and I think, Søren, you popped some slides in here. I think Herbert did as well. I want to talk about this one first because it ties into government and taxes. So this is Eric Voorhees, who is a very well-known person in the space. He understands things like disruption, Tesla, Bitcoin, crypto. And he said, not only did privately funded SpaceX obliterate taxpayer-funded NASA and rockets in space, but as a side hustle, brought affordable high-speed internet to the entire planet. So the question is, bipartisan infrastructure law spent $65 billion and achieved nothing. Debt on your children in order to do jack poop. And the entire cost of Starlink is to build a fraction of what politicians burned to virtue signal. This goes back to the world, the future, decentralization, taxation. What do we need governments for? And this all ties into how everything in the world is going to radically change in a very short window of time. How can the governments keep up? Hans, I'm going to kick this one to you. I see you nodding violently over there. Let's go.
I mean, it is very hard to think about how they can survive the amount of radical changes that are going to occur. And I mean, especially when you think about, like we said, the amount of technological process or progress that's occurring that we need to have as a national priority. And it's probably going to take us getting into some sort of a conflict for us to realize this. But the ability to mass manufacture goods, we need to be leaders in humanoid robots. And we also need to be leaders in drones. And both of those are areas of technology that China is taking very seriously, on top of their taking AI very seriously. Where here it seems like at least we want to talk about how we're going to slow down AI, and no one's talking about our need to develop drone technology. No one's talking about our need to be in a leading position in humanoid robots. But thankfully, we do have a very robust venture capital ecosystem and startups that are pursuing these opportunities, that they understand that these are things that we need to be doing. So I think that we will have a workforce that's ready to pursue those opportunities, but we're certainly not spending the type of investments, both from a dollar standpoint, but also a human capital standpoint, in those areas that we need to be. And without those investments, I I do struggle to understand how our government will be able to meet the challenges of the next 10 to 15 years, much less if you move out over a 50-year period. But the history of the United States is one where we kind of lumber along and don't do what we need to do ahead of time. And then when the need arises, are suddenly capable of getting our things together and moving in the right direction at a rapid pace. So hopefully we can do that. But what that means for, like I said, our government structure, it remains to be seen. One of the things that the proliferation of bots does mean for sure is just massive deflation. That I think that your point about the dispersion, the gap between the haves and the have-nots may still continue to exist to a large degree, that the people with the most may have far more than the people with the least. But I think that it's hard to imagine a world with the types of numbers of robots that we're talking about, where even the poorest of the poor don't have access to goods and services that are probably beyond what we have access to today, even the richest among us. And so I don't know what that does to society either, but that's also a different type of challenge than any government is currently set up to solve. And so that's another reason why I think that what government is and what it means is going to have to change over the next 100 years, certainly.
The world will be very different in 3 to 4 years. I think 100 years, there may be no planet
It's almost
anymore.
unfathomable. Yes.
Yeah. So crazy. And one other thing that I always think about too is I look at a lot of people here are from Europe watching the show right now, and the Europeans are very interested in Tesla and disruption and all that type of stuff, and escaping the matrix, because they see the mess of too much regulation across Europe and all the different countries. I mean, Herbert, where do you see Europe standing right now with bots in the global playing field today?
That's the interesting thing, right? CERN has put together a whole list of all the top bot companies, and what do you see? You see the top is primarily US. There is a company called 1X that is Norwegian.
Norway, yeah.
That's Norway. That is heading out, leading, and one of the main companies out there. But everyone else is going to be Asian. It's going to be the Chinese. So it may turn out yet again, just like the electric vehicles, it's going to be Tesla, and then maybe a bunch of the Asians companies, because you need manufacturing, right? Like it's easy to show a prototype. You might be able to partner to get the AI. Where are you going to get the manufacturing from? And so where do people get manufacturing from right now? It's going to be in China. So unless the more European founders come up with the robots, and then they have to show partnership with China. You know what I mean? Otherwise, they're going to be caught again, flat-footed. But I'm really excited about 1X. I think that they separated themselves from everyone else. They have 2 robots, one called Eve, one called Neo. Neo is going to be the humanoid one without the wheels and will actually have hands. But they're going to go straight to consumer. So unlike everyone else who's going through factory first, they're the first one that said, no, we're going to go straight to consumer.
That's really good info. And, we know we are at the stage where we have a robot on wheels, which is the car. And then we're going to have the robot on legs, which is Optimus. And they both run off the same AI 5, hardware 4, whatever you want to think. And CERN, what you said earlier, if they do build 1 billion bots, or imagine there's 10 billion bots in the world. Elon Musk said we only need to make 10% of them. Nobody can manufacture like Tesla at scale. Nobody has the brain in the bot, which is, I would argue, the most important point. It's more important than the fingertips.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's pretty much an insurmountable advantage. Other players may be able to pick up the crumbs of niche segments, but this is going to be so important, I think, going forward. So let's get the Robotaxi out of the way first. And
James,
yes.
James, sorry, just before we go there, if I could just maybe further set the stage for the audience.
Yeah.
Here's how I think about it. We have a scarcity of intelligence in the world right now. It's limited to what's in human brains. And what we're doing is we're developing AI systems that will also be intelligent. And up until fairly recently, a few years ago, AI was about perception and detection. It was about taking what it saw and trying to figure out what it was. What NVIDIA has done, is allowed to do with OpenAI and others, is turn AI into something that generates knowledge, not just takes it in. That is the game changer. And so what Jensen at NVIDIA has been saying is that this is a foundational building block for literally everything. This is like electricity being invented. This is something that everybody, every company, every human on the planet can benefit from, right? It's foundational. And so what Jensen's been talking about, he says any machine becomes autonomous, becomes intelligent. So clearly a car, we can see that now with Tesla's vehicles. They're going to become autonomous. They have enough intelligence to drive themselves. We're talking about bots. The bots will be autonomous and they'll have enough intelligence to do things. But it applies to every machine on the planet. Your dishwasher, your refrigerator, your washing machine, everything will have human level intelligence. And so again, it's going to allow a step change in our economy, because now we don't have a scarcity of intelligence anymore. We have an abundance of intelligence. And Tony Seba has talked about this. He's talked about how the cost of energy is declining, but he's also talked about how the cost of intelligence is going to trend towards zero as well over time. And that's what is the trend behind all of this. So just to set the stage a little bit with that. And that's why hardware 3 and 4 and AI 5 are so important. You need the computing power in the device, in the car, in the bot, in your dishwasher eventually, to be able to generate the intelligence that's needed. Sorry, you're on mute, James.
So that very profound, like Mopbots just said in the comments. It's kind of, it's, the exponentiality is very hard for humans to wrap their heads around. I've said that for years.
Yeah.
We're going into that phase. Okay, let's talk about robotaxis. We want to get to the heart of this issue. What do they should do now? Okay, it's a special stock. They hear about all this greatness. ARK Invest came out and said 2,600, 3,100 bull case robotaxi, and they own. First of all, I don't understand why they've only just evaluated the robotaxi and forgot mega packs and bots. But anyway, that's a separate issue. But it's good they're so focused. And Elon did say, when it comes to any analyst, they are the closest to where this thing is going. Okay, so we have, call it $2,600 by 2029, 4 years, 5 years away, depending on how you measure your years. What do you guys think about that and the whole Cybercab model? And when do you think these Cybercabs will start rolling around the roads?
Yeah, so ARK Invest, they have their one slide that I thought was really important, which is their Monte Carlo probabilistic analysis. And they said that they believe that within next year, by 2025, there's a 58% chance that the first commercialization of Tesla's robotaxi will happen next year. Then I think something like a 30+% chance it will happen the second year. Yeah. And then it just plummets to almost zero. Yeah. Like it'll be like a 0% chance or a 0.1% chance it'll happen longer than 2 years from now. So if you don't believe and agree with that Tesla will launch a first, I don't know if they defined what this is actually, the first pilot of a commercialized robotaxi on that year. If you agree that it happens, then they have a proof point. They will show, okay, here's this one city, here's how much money we're making. The robotaxis actually work. People are actually, using the app and using it. That might be enough for the stock to start skyrocketing and people to understand that this is a real deal. Do you guys all agree that, 80, 90 plus 95% chance that Tesla will do the very first commercialization in the next 2 years?
I personally think they're going to have a cybercab rolling around somewhere, maybe in Shanghai or some part of China, and maybe a few little pilot cities in the US that are very easy to navigate and very safe, where they have the data from. People talk about, is it Tempe or Phoenix or Scottsdale, Arizona? is where some of the other people are
think
testing. Maybe some
Chandler.
city like that. Yeah.
When?
Yeah.
Well, I think 6 to 12 months for sure, but China maybe earlier. I think China maybe first.
So Robin TV pointed out something I thought was very insightful. You remember earlier you talked about AI 5, which is the chip hardware 5 is going to be called AI 5. That's planned to be 16 months from now, or 18 months away from now, a year and a half. So it might make sense that that's that same timing that they would launch the Robotaxi first design vehicle 18 months away. That was a very insightful analysis.
I'm
Yeah.
not sure about that. So I have a slightly different view. One of the things that Dave Lee said is that he saw a demo of the Robotaxi app almost 5 years ago, internal to the company. So they've had a
What?
working app in the
Wait.
company for
Repeat
a
what
long
you just
time.
said.
Yeah,
So
Dave Lee. Go
said
ahead.
that almost 5 years ago, he saw a working demo app of the Robotaxi ride hail app from someone inside the company. And then here, if I've got a screen share up, James, if you could
Yep.
put that up.
Boom.
So
Trying
this
to-
is the LinkedIn profile of Rosalie Nathans, who appears to be the woman who was in the little teaser video
Yes.
that Tesla shared at the end of the video.
Mhm.
And she says that she actually got to demo the ride hailing platform. And so I think it's entirely possible that Tesla is already today demoing this commercial ride hailing platform internal to the company. And so what that means for the rollout between now and actual customer commercial rollout, I'm not entirely sure. But I would say that there's more going on under the hood than Tesla has been willing to show us, and that these teasers, there's real meat on the bones to them.
That's impressive. And yeah, I heard the same thing too, that obviously Robotaxi has been a grand vision for Elon for the longest time. But it's been a hard nut to crack because they need FSD first, which needs adoption and data. And until they had version 12, they didn't have the ability to scale the learning. Now they do. So I believe that. So back to square one. How do the stock markets actually work? Cern, this one's for you. Okay, we know it's coming. ARK is 60-40, i.e. 60% chance it's going to be rolling out next year, and definitely 100% chance in the next 2 years. How much money do we see rolling in so the Wall Street analysts can fill in their little boxes with their pencils saying, oh, this is an extra dollar per share in earnings per share, and because it's growing at this rate, we'll give it a PE of 40 or 60. When is that tipping point?
Well, the cynic in me says that Tesla needs to spoon feed the analysts the information and say, here's the model and here's how it's going to ramp. Right? Analysts have shown little capacity for imagination. That said, once it becomes clear that Robotaxi is operational, even if we have one city and X number of cars and X revenue, that allows somebody to build a model based on some real data, not just the spreadsheets that I've been building where you try to think through the problem and come up with reasonable numbers. That's not good enough, right? So it's not going to take much. Even a trial, a sample somewhere where you get some real data about what customers are paying and the demand and all that, that will allow those analysts to build their models. So at that point, I think it becomes real. And the stock potentially could move in unison with all that. And I think the last time the stock had a big move, it was sort of similar around the ramp of Model 3 and how that dramatically changed the profitability profile and the revenue growth profile of the company. The stock moved well before those numbers came in, the company's books.
That's true.
So the same may happen again.
Yeah, it was a 9 or 10x in 6 or 7 months, if I recall, which is very special. Any final thoughts? I want us to get into the heart of this. We believe, okay, Cybercabs are coming. They're going to be rolling around in, say, the next 6 to 12 months, somewhere on the planet in pilot manners. And then once they get to the level of safety, March of the nines, and the jurisdictional approval, boom, big bang. That's the plan.
I don't know.
You seem a bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's just we think it would be all four of us probably think that, but we just continue to hear, that people won't do it until they see it. It doesn't matter that you tell them that I've solved this, this problem. They'll wait until it actually shows up as dollars, and then only when the dollars are growing big enough, it's almost like they're late movers. So the vast majority won't jump ahead of time. So,
and getting back to vehicles and bots, the 100 million number, I thought that was very profound too, because that means they're not going along the lines of what Reuters said, giving up the kind of 20K, 25K car, but they still plan on stamping these things out with the unboxed model, etc. So you were all confident that that is still the plan going forward. Hans? Big nod.
Can you restate the question? I'm trying to.
Yeah, so
make sure
you remember
I
Reuters
follow.
came out and said Tesla's giving up on the $25,000 vehicle. They're going all in on something else. And that's kind of maybe what prompted Elon Musk to come out with the 8/8 date. It was kind of pushed to defud the FUD somehow, is my theory. But still, when he talks about these vehicles, and he talked about 100 million units running around when he spoke about Inference, that was very telling to me. So they still plan to ramp a lot of vehicles.
Absolutely, yeah, and that was so. I think that the one thing that the Reuters article did have was there was a specific number, an NV. I can't remember if it was 201 or something, and that number, I believe they probably were correct in that variation of the compact vehicle did get nixed, but that was one of a host of variations, and the project overall is definitely moving ahead, full steam. And they're pulling forward and saying, hey, we're going to produce some compact variations of the car on the existing lines. Those are probably a different model number than the ones that Reuters were reporting on. And then they're moving ahead, obviously, with the completely unboxed model. And they're just kind of reallocating where in time they plan to do all of those things. But when they get to robotaxis, I'll just go back to what Elon said at the first autonomy day. He said that they plan to run the company at cash flow break even once they launch a robotaxi network, that they will be adding Tesla owned vehicles to the fleet at the rate that they're generating cash, essentially. And I think that's where you do get into the nutty 100 millions of vehicles type numbers, especially if they are able to be generating cash off of a preliminary version of this robotaxi network at high numbers, then they can just reinvest that cash into larger and larger amounts of production very quickly. And that's where you just, get into the types of scenarios that are absolutely insane.
And this dovetails into why you can't buy your leases. They're rolling back to Tesla down the Model 3s and the Model Ys.
Absolutely.
As I heard
it's
too.
so confusing to me because Elon did confirm that you can lease, you can rent the bot first, and you can still buy it. We're going to do both models. I don't know why you would sell the bot if you can make that much more money, if you can roll it out that much faster, you can maximize its usage much better if you control it. And since he said that about the bots, now I have to eat crow, because I kept saying, why would they continue selling the Robotaxi first design vehicle? They would keep that for themselves. They'll sell the regular cars that can be used as Robotaxi, drivable cars for Robotaxi, but not the Robotaxi first design vehicle. Now I have to rethink that. Why would they do this?
Well, I think what they have planned is they're keeping the optionality open, first of all. Second of all, they will go after kind of fleet markets where there's a lot of revenue to be had. But if I live in Omaha, Nebraska, and there's 10 rides a day, give that market to people who own Teslas. So that's the way maybe they're going to think about it going forward. And then regarding the leasing versus buying versus selling versus a la carte menu of functionality for bots, etc., and how you use the He mentioned the Uber versus Airbnb model for the Cybertaxi. It just,
Yeah.
it's wide open. I don't think they have landed on the actual case yet. Thoughts on that, Herb?
From my perspective, it was my post that prompted Elon to say that they would both sell and rent the bots, and renting first. And that to me makes a lot of sense. But even if they do sell them for some low price, there still is highly likely there has to be some sort of ongoing revenue stream associated with the bot, because they actually would be massively underselling the bot in terms of its value if they sold it for just $20,000. It doesn't make economic sense. In fact, there would be a massive gray market that would come up basically and utilize the bots and sell them at higher prices to other people, because the economic value that the bot adds is way more than $20,000.
Yeah.
Right. So, they can sell them cheaply if they want to and get the cost of making them back, but there's going to be some monthly cost associated with it for sure.
Let's walk through some of those things. Let me blow this up fully so people can see. Søren, can you walk us through? I put a big red underline where Elon commented on your posts.
The first one on the left, I was kind of calling him out a little bit as gently as I could and trying to get his attention, and it worked. But I was suggesting that his $25 trillion market cap just from bots was actually understating it by a factor of 10. Unfortunately, he didn't comment on that part, but he did suggest here that bots would be offered both as rentals as well as to buy, but the former first. So that was a great piece of information, because that's something that we've been wondering about for some time. The middle one, Alex Voigt, retweeted my post and added some to it. And again, talking about the $25 trillion bot valuation being too conservative. And Elon said, yeah. So that is about as strong as a confirmation that you get that he's sandbagging that number. Right. That's a crazy number already. And he's not going to come out and say, yeah, you know what, you guys are right. It's more like 250 trillion or whatever the number is. So that was nice, and that's about as direct or as strong as Elon's going to go on agreeing with us on these numbers. But that still is very helpful, because we believe that he is sandbagging these numbers. And then replying to this interview that Jensen did in terms of robots being everywhere, and then Elon saying that they'll be 10 times more common than cars, right? And James, there's about 1.5 billion cars in the world.
Yeah, I defaced your slide.
Yeah. No, that's great.
Yeah.
So you're looking at 15 billion bots. And there's been other tweets that Elon has mentioned that potentially there could be 2 to 3 to 4 times as many bots as people on the planet. And so Elon has given a number of ideas at different points in time about how many bots there will be. And maybe his thinking over time is refining a little bit on that. But 15 billion bots in the world at whatever point you're talking about is a staggering number of bots.
And with a negative birth rate, that's 2 for 1 right now. Assuming we'll go from 8 billion to 7 billion as we go forward. So these are staggering numbers. And the fact, again, we go back to the very beginning, he's dropping breadcrumbs, and he's been thinking about this for a long time. I always say that every step he makes, he planned for it 8 years earlier. Do you think that's the case? Or am I crazy?
I don't know.
I think there is an element of kind of discovery that does occur, but I think he's thinking about it. He's definitely thinking about, he says he thinks in branching probability streams. And I think that whenever we arrive at a point that he has thought about this as a potential outcome before, and he sees what branch of the probability stream that we're on and is redrawing that moving forward. And I think that he has thought about most of the major possibilities that we have run into for a long time. And we can just go back to, like I said, the move to put hardware 3 into Teslas. They started designing them in 2017, installing them in 2019. There still is not a competitive vehicle computer that can do what that computer can do with inside of the size and power operating envelope that it can do it in today. It's 2024.
And there's not
That
even a company
does,
that has been pulling in all the data from these vehicles over these last 7 or 8 years. The
yeah,
data moat is insurmountable. Not only there's no other competitor that has the hardware or cameras or sensor suite, whatever, to do what they do. Never mind the infrastructure, just upload those gigabytes every day. Somebody said how much they were uploading per night years ago. They were pushing the boundaries of the internet when they first started doing this, and nobody
Yeah.
talks about that. That's just so talk about thinking so far ahead is mind blowing.
Well, and I think that is what he's thinking about now with respect to bots. And, when you really stop to think about just from first principles, how many people in the world work on something that each human gets the direct benefit of that labor in a day? It's not 2, it's not 3, it's not 10, it's thousands, if not tens of thousands. Why would there only be 1, 2, 3, or 4 bots per person at a ceiling? Now, there's definitely a huge argument that you can make that only a certain fraction of the bots that there will be humanoid robots, and I would agree with that. But I think that we're talking about hundreds or thousands of robots per person is probably where this ends up in the long tail version of the future. Just because if you as a consumer have more needs that you'd like to have met than only 3 or 4 bots, then there will be a market for it. And that, I mean, it's insane to think about, but when you break it down to first principles, the question is, why is that not going to be the case? As long as the energy is there, as long as the intelligence to operate those bots without human input is there, why are they not trying to provide you with more and more goods and services?
Good question. Let's get back to some more bot stuff. So, Søren, you shared this. This is from, I think it was Smokeaway originally wrote it about the ramping. Elon did say maybe 10,000 next year, already has 2 working in a factory today. They hope to get to, do you say 500 by the end of the year, but maybe 10,000 next year or 5,000 next year? Does that ring a bell?
No, he said next year it will be 1,000 or 2,000 next year.
Okay, 1,000 or 2,000.
Yeah, sorry, Søren, let me, if it's okay. So this post by Smokeaway matches all the interviews we've done with the CEOs of quite a number of humanoid bot companies, where they would say, we've got handfuls of them today. I think that the ramp will be next year, it'll be tens to hundreds, then it'll be thousands, then it'll be 10,000. It's like a 10x each year. Many CEOs of humanoid bot companies said the same thing. When Smokeaway said this, 1,000, 2024, that's a lot higher than any company. No company has 1,000 this year, but a lot of start talking about it. 10,000 next year is a 10x from that, and so forth. Elon said not quite that fast, but not far wrong.
Yep.
So, yeah. So now for them to say that, Elon to say that we're going to have 1,000 or 2,000 next year, that is staggeringly faster than anybody's ever said. I guess when you see this, you think that they're behind. They're actually well ahead.
Yeah.
And just to coincide with the numbers that I had put together, just as an illustration on the right, you can see my ramp was much more conservative. And that got to Tesla, 10 million bots deployed in total cumulatively by 2032, right? And 10 million bots deployed at some of the numbers that we projected gets you to, potentially a $10 trillion market cap just on 10 million bots. So, we don't know how fast it can ramp. I thought Elon's comment here was pretty staggering. Not quite that fast, but not far wrong. Even if these numbers are half of what Smokeaway put together here, if they're making 50 million by 2029, that is a massive number of bots. And you follow that through on Tesla's financial statements, and you get some big numbers. It is absolutely staggering. So,
and maybe share with the audience how the bots can help ramp the bots too. And also, bots are not as complex as cars, nor do they have as much components or metal or weight. And Elon said something very interesting during the shareholder meeting that I didn't hear anybody else pick up on, but he talked about the actual cost of goods sold. And he said you can bring it down basically to the weight of what you're selling. Did anybody pick up on that? I thought that was very profound. Basically, you can keep shaving costs down to basically the weight of the metal. Hans,
yeah, and the Optimus is about 3% of the weight of a Model 3.
Yep.
So, it's not that much weight. You don't need gigapresses, for example, to build bots. You don't need this massive, massive factory that you see in Texas to build vehicles. Building bots at scale will be a massive challenge. Elon has talked about that. And so building them at scale will still be difficult, but not as challenging as building vehicles at scale. And so, Tesla is great at manufacturing. They will figure out a way to build millions and millions of these things.
And the margin profile of them makes it a much easier scale up too. That, when you're trying to scale up something that is as heavy and complex as a vehicle, and you've got tiny margins to work with, that is a very, very difficult needle to thread. But when you're working with something that it weighs much less, the complexity is much less, the supply chain is much less complex, and then the thing has a margin profile that's an order of magnitude more profitable than a car, then the challenge of scale, like basically they can afford to just pursue this at full speed as fast as they can go, and they're not going to be worried about trying to pick up pennies at the early part of the ramp, because they won't necessarily need to.
The other interesting thing about this is robots as a service. As the bots are further developed, they become more capable and therefore more valuable. And so if you offer it as a service, it gives you the ability to increase the price of the bot on a per month or per year basis as the robot's capabilities increase. So initially, when they roll these bots out, maybe these bots can only do tasks that you would pay a human, $15 an hour for. But as the robot gets more intelligent and more capable, they will work their way up the food chain to be able to do work that you would pay $15, $20, $25, $30, $35 for per hour. And so that allows Tesla to adjust the pricing of the bot as well.
It was joked. It was like factory worker by day, sushi chef by night, type of thing.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure about this this idea that many of us are getting excited about bots building bots, because even Scott Walter has been saying that if once you get to full manufacturing, you don't necessarily need to have humans in the loop for many things. Mobile phones are being manufactured today. How many humans do you actually need to have in that process? What matters more is automated factories, and who's the leader in automated factories? It's Tesla. They're already doing that with their cars. I think in the automotive factory, somebody told me that at this point, 50% of jobs in an auto factory is done by human. So certainly you will need bots that can help that. But creating the bots themselves, do you really need a human if you didn't have the bots to do that? Or is it something that you could eventually just have fully automated?
Well, I'd definitely lean towards that. The fewer humanoid robots in the loop of manufacturing bots as you scale up to any sort of significant volumes that, if you're talking about making something in the millions of units per year quantity, that you more than justify the capital cost of any specialized tooling. And specialized tooling is going to be much, much faster and more efficient at scale at building these things than the general purpose humanoid robots will.
You've got to admit, though, from a theatrical standpoint, bots building bots would be pretty cool. So maybe at the very end of the factory line, the last bot that gets made turns around and puts the last piece on the next bot.
Presses the button to turn them on.
The button, wakes them up.
And just so people know as well, I walked the Cybertruck line twice with
right.
a Ford engineer, and he walked me through everything. He said, there's no humans on this line. And we spoke to a couple of the guys. They have engineers who supervise the line from above from cameras.
Yeah.
And they detect bugs, and then they intervene if there's a problem. But it's completely automated every step of the way. It's bonkers. So sharing this slide one last time, because we're going to move quicker now. 10x every year. CERN, way back when we modeled, you had 10 million bots out to 2034, if I'm not mistaken. This says 10 million out to 2028. Who's right here?
Well, based on Elon's response, Smoke Away is more right than I think the projections that I had, which I think in hindsight now look pretty conservative.
Exactly. And you mentioned phones, Herbert. You mentioned phones versus bots. This is a very interesting analysis as well by you, CERN, in terms of the actual sheer volume. You want to explain this for a second to the people?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. I'll take you through this really quickly. So Apple right now has an estimated 1.4 billion active iPhones in the world. And Apple has, let's say, annual revenues of about 400 billion. So per active phone per year, Apple's getting about $285, right? Now, people buy new phones every 3 or 4 years, but just on average, $285 per year per phone. And Apple's market cap is 3.3 trillion. Okay. Let's skip the middle of this for now. Let's go to the bottom. If Tesla's market cap was to match Apple, 3.3 trillion, and if revenue per bot was 28,000, which is $4 an hour, 7,000 hours a year, that would generate, to get $400 billion, they would need to have 14.3 million bots in operation. Okay, so go back to Smoke Away's projections and when Tesla's going to ramp up production, how long is it going to take to get 14 million bots?
2028.
2028.
Or 2029, yeah.
Okay, so just on bots alone, you could have 14 million or thereabouts, and just the bot valuation would be 3.3 trillion. That would match Apple. Now, again, if Tesla's on a massive ramping schedule, the marketplace would probably assign them a much higher PE than Apple is getting. And so if we go to the middle of the page, this is looking out some point in the future. If there are 10 billion bots in the world, and if Tesla has 20% market share, that's 2 billion bots. And now if the bot pricing is only $2 an hour, 14,000 a year, Tesla's revenue from bots could be 28 trillion. And the market cap then could be 230 trillion. Right, so Elon's projection of saying bots could create a $25 trillion market value for Tesla, I said he could be off by a factor of 10. I came at from different numbers, but this also is very similar. It would be 70 times Apple, just with 2 billion bots. Now, 2 billion bots is a lot, but as Hans mentioned, it's not really when you consider everything they could be used for, and also when you consider the off-planet potential for bots down the road. That's a whole nother thing that is out there. It's not near term, but if we're going to be doing something on Mars, and we know a guy that's hell bent on it, right? It makes a lot of sense to send in the bots as well as a few humans, and more bots than people. So 2 billion bots to me longer term doesn't seem crazy. I know 230 trillion in market cap seems crazy to a lot of people, right? But let's check back in a decade or two and see if it is.
Yeah. And in the meantime, we all have to stay healthy.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to do some live modeling of some bots. We're going to get numbers from everybody and do that in a second. There's a couple of other slides here. Herbert, did you put these slides in regarding the step changes?
No.
Of price, the seasonality?
I added those, James, in case you wanted to discuss that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we don't need to go back to history, but I do think what is important is, first thing is, we're going into election year seasonality. So we know the stock market does very well in election years. A lot of people want to know, when is Tesla going to move? And most of the action happens June onwards. So that's the first point. And we've seen crazy gains in traditional markets, NASDAQ, for example, driven by NVIDIA. Actually, that's an interesting side question for you guys. When do you think Tesla will have its NVIDIA moment? Because we saw what that thing did in a very short window of time.
Well, so
Yeah.
one of the things about NVIDIA is just that it was such a large company, and this is where I do think that, to Herbert's point, it's kind of a show me the numbers, that when you have a company that is within spitting distance of, a top 10 market cap company in the world, that it takes earnings growth to make massive moves. And this is where I'm not sure that we can expect the types of moves that we saw in 2018, 2019 in anticipation of those earnings growth moves. I think we actually have to see the earnings growth hit the bottom line. But once we begin to see, I think it'll start with, the rollout of a robotaxi network, or either that or large growth in FSD SaaS revenues, or a combination of the two of them. But once we start to see software type margins and the cash flow and revenue that come from that flowing through, and people are looking at, okay, hey, is this something that's going to grow over time or not? And everything looks like, yes, we're set to grow, that we're going to have a vehicle platform that's cheaper to produce in cogs and is going to have higher volume upper limits, then that's when you'll really start to see people open their eyes and start to assign some of that value to Tesla at that point in time.
Exactly, because the wild card is the FSD subscription. If they can get to, say, a 20% penetration rate, and that's all pure margin, that could have a huge impact. And that's something that Wall Street will understand. If, of course, the company itself needs to get recategorized as a technology SaaS company, because right now the auto analysts are stuck banging rocks together and they can't quite wrap their heads around Tesla. But another one regarding Tesla seasonality as well. I put a big green arrow over this too, and a shout out to Josh who got this out there. But you can see here very clearly Tesla has its best period in the markets summertime onwards. And that's probably because the automotive industry is slow in Q1. Q2 is a bit messy, but then towards the end of the year, it really ramps up. So that could be another good tailwind for us as well. For people who are looking to stack a position, the question is when and how much, and how long will we stay down at these very oversold levels is the big question that I have.
James, it's interesting for me because the setup, the similarity with NVIDIA actually is very interesting. NVIDIA sold its first AI computer to OpenAI in 2016. Elon was there. There's a picture of Jensen with Elon on that delivery. From then on, NVIDIA, Jensen started talking more and more about AI. No one listened. No one believed them. In late 2022, NVIDIA's main business, the gaming business, suffered a downturn, and the stock was destroyed. I think it was down 60% or something from its high. Still, no one listened, right? And to me, the setup is very similar to Tesla. Just as the gaming business no longer matters really to NVIDIA, the auto delivery business will soon no longer matter to Tesla. No one is listening. No one is paying attention. But like Jensen, Elon is saying the same things. And you know what? They're riding exactly the same wave. The wave just hit NVIDIA first. That this AI wave that is powering NVIDIA now to these crazy heights that people can barely understand is going to hit Tesla as well at some point. I can't predict when. But we can see Robotaxi coming and we can see bots coming. And it's likely to start. The wave is likely to start being visible within the next couple of years, in my opinion, for both of them.
And just to build on Søren's point a little bit, one of the things that I've been saying recently is that NVIDIA is pursuing the platform play for AI. They're trying to provide the picks and shovels that allow other people to build these AI tools. Well, we've seen that play out before a number of times as well. And usually those picks and shovels providers, they do very well. But this is another Chamath Palihapitiya point, that the things that successfully build products and services on top of those platforms create even more value than the platform itself does. And by necessity, they have to. The platform can't take up 100% of the value that's created on top of them. Otherwise, the things that are created on top of them are pointless. And so the markets that Elon and Tesla are pursuing are those things that are built on top of artificial intelligence that are bigger opportunities, they're bigger markets, they're bigger TAMs than the opportunity that NVIDIA is pursuing now. And so when Tesla is able to execute on those markets, they're going to make what NVIDIA's run today that looks so huge, it's going to make that look like small potatoes.
The big thing that I think people have not registered in their brains is that car business and the future robotaxi AI business are very, very different business models. We are talking about recurring high margin revenue. So if you sell a car today, Søren, you got this all mapped out, right? You're going to make $7,000, $10,000, $15,000 of profit one time. Then you're done. Next year, you have to sell a brand new car to make $7,000, $10,000, $15,000 of revenue. When you sell one bot every single year, you're going to make, right? And this is the big number. But Søren has modeled out some high number like 90 grand per year. But let's say even if it's 10 grand, let's assume it's this tiny little 10 grand, but it's every single year. Every bot you make will make that. And Søren pointed out a little bit earlier, you could actually see a future where you'll start charging more because the bots get smarter, more valuable. It's just a software update. All of a sudden they got new tasks and you might charge per task. This is, it's just unheard of as opposed to, yeah, and I'm not, can you think of anything else that is like recurring revenue that is this amount of money? We're talking about 10 to 100 grand per year per item that you sell.
Well, let's try jump into that right now. I don't know if I can share my screen. Oh, Google Chrome, fixed preferences. Ugh. Hold on a second. I need to do this. This is a tricky thing. Edge is, let me see. See if I can get this going. Boom. Use password. One of the curses I have is, yeah, I had to restart the Chrome, make it work again, because we can get into some modeling now and play with some scenarios just so the community can get a feel for where we are positioning ourselves right now. Hold on a second. Let me see if this thing popped up. Whoop, wrong slide. Give me 1 second. Keep on talking.
I mean, Søren, talk about the recurring revenue model. I mean, am I not wrong? It's not just recurring. It's like high margin recurring.
No, that's right.
High revenue, high margin.
Yeah, and certainly initially, what I think will happen is the bots will be fairly reasonably priced. Although we've heard from a couple of bot companies that they are expecting that they're seeing pricing that's in line with the labor rates.
Yeah.
In line with what the tasks that the bot is doing. So if the bot is doing $30 an hour work, then the companies are receiving $30 an hour for those bots. That is a lot more than what I've modeled. So if that's true, if that is able to be sustained for a while, then these companies, as they make more capable bots, should earn more per hour for those bots. But what will happen over time with competition and as this market scales, we do expect that bot pricing per hour will come down. And this is how humanity benefits, even if you can't afford to buy a bot yourself, because the cost of everything you buy should start to come down. Everything that a bot touches can be made more efficiently and more cheaply. And so everybody should benefit from that. And that is kind of a snowball that builds and rolls down the hill and gets bigger and has a bigger impact quarter after quarter, year after year. And so these bots, like all new technologies, are a deflationary force that'll work their way through the economy. And if if Elon is right about the scale of the ramp of the production, then this is a force that could happen quicker than anybody can imagine today. And we collectively have been thinking about this for quite a while. And those numbers that Smokeway and Elon were talking about were far higher than what we were dreaming about. So just to put it into context for folks, the scale of this potentially is absolutely enormous. Now, I will say that with anything that has exponential growth, it feels really slow in the beginning. right? 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. That doesn't feel like a lot of growth. But once that exponential really starts to kick in, then it really takes off. Now, what we could be looking at here is a double exponential. Herbert, I think you've talked about that before. So
Great. So I'm going to try again now to share this puppy if I can. Let me see. Is this working?
Mm-hmm.
Can
Hard
you
to
see?
Yep, we can see it.
It might be a little bit of an eye chart. I'll blow it up a little bit bigger, but let's go 150%. Now, what we did in the past is it's kind of a model that we can build different scenarios. You've been through this before. Let's ignore the car, the FSD, and just focus on the bot, which is down here, Optimus bot. Now, what I did was, and let me know if everything is tracking and everybody can see, because I can't see what I'm showing, but hopefully it's good enough. Should I turn off our cameras and just focus on the spreadsheet?
Mm-hmm.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, blow it up a bit. All right. Now we took, in the past, Søren, last time we did this, we started the bots in year 2, which would take us to 2026. Now we're taking it to year 1, 2025, with 10,000 bots a year. So maybe we should revise it down to 1,000, and then we can do a step change of 1,000% growth every year, or 1,000% is a step change, so 10,000 to 100,000, etc., on and on, and then modify the growth rate adjustment down by a percentage, and then we have the price per unit. Now, I don't have the ability to do leasing or pricing. We can just do kind of price per unit, margin per unit, profit margin 50,000. So if we sell them for 30,000 a pop, Tesla makes $15,000. That profit margin could be a lot higher, especially as we go a la carte with features and functionalities that we add later. And then it'll project out a stock price. So if we go to the export, we can go to stock price here, and then we can see exactly the size of the bot impact over time. So that's kind of how this works. But what I want to do is mine your minds right now on how this could work. We'll do kind of a expected case, bear case, bull case scenario. So 2025, do you think Tesla could ship bots?
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
How many?
If we want to be conservative, I think 1,000.
1,000. Okay. Let's go blow this full screen. 1,000. Not. All right. And then annual growth rate adjustment. If we have 1,000% growth, that means if we go out here to 2026, that'll take us to, hang on a second, Optimus bots. With its shares outstanding. We don't want that. This was working before I tested it.
No, you were there. You were at the right place. I thought that was units.
Okay.
Was it
Oh yeah, units, 110,000. Yes, I was looking at the wrong cell. So we go from 10,000. Hang on, somehow it had bots. So we go from 1,000 to 10,500 to 110,000. And then year 3, year 4, we'll go to 1.15 million in 2028.
Yeah.
Now, per the smoke away, he had 10 million
exactly
in 2028. So I don't know how we want to ramp.
I think ours is the right number. Ours is the right number. That's why he means by it. It could be if it's off just by 1 year, then it's like a 10x reduction. But this is probably the right
okay.
number.
And then we get to 12 million bots in 2029.
Yeah.
127 million 2030. Okay.
Yeah.
So we agree on that. Everybody's on the same page.
The jump from year 5 to year 6, from 12 million to 120 million, might be a big stretch in that single year. But
I wouldn't think so, right? So that's why is that a big stretch, Søren? What year is it again? How many years from now?
26 to 2027. We're going to go from 1 million to 12 million in 2029.
Yeah.
So 2028 to 2029, big jump.
again, I don't see that as a huge leap. But you're saying because, let's say, the cars, how many cars can you make in a year?
No, I'm sorry. I'm saying from 12 million up to then the next year, I think is 120 some million.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right, James?
Yep.
What's year
It
6?
goes from 2028, we have 1.15 million. And then 2029, 12.15 million. 2030, 127 million.
Yeah,
These
that one feels like a bit of a stretch to me, just being conservative, to 10x the previous year. But that's, they've got plenty of time to scale up production between now and 2030.
Yeah, that's my point.
And again, if they can spit out, what did I calculate? They're spitting out Cybertrucks now every 40 seconds, assuming a 40-hour work week. And that's a very complex piece of machinery.
Yeah.
It's possible they can do it with bots. Okay, average sales price per unit. Let's just try anchor in on 2029 conservatively, because that will match the ARC timeframe as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so average.
It's not so much the price for me, but your profit margin, that leaves $15,000 per bot in profit.
Yep.
That for me doesn't sound crazy, although what I'm talking about is $15,000 per year per bot.
Exactly.
One-time sale.
Yeah. Which
Right.
we don't model here.
No, we're just modeling the sales. So I don't know how you want to adjust for that here.
Well, we could say if we agree with the amount of value of lease per year, and assuming the life of the bot is 3 years.
Exactly. That's a nice little tiny compromise that's still very conservative. Just modeling 3 years worth of profit.
So we could put in what, 90,000 or 60,000?
Yeah.
So we put in 90,000 here for giggles, and still 50% margin on this business.
Mm-hmm.
45,000
with a PE of 100 as they grow. And then things get kind of nutty with the numbers. If we go out to 2029, you'll see here the stock price, based on just these numbers that we punched in, it would go to $12,433. And you multiply that by 3.3 billion shares.
Sales of 12 million bots at that point, which is a drop in the bucket. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. That's a tenth of smoke away.
Yeah. Well, it's Cern is saying that 112 million bots he's not worried about. He was worried about the jump from 12 to 127 million.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
and remember, just divide it by, what do you think? Like, if you can make 1 million cars, how many bots do you think you can make if you can make 1 million cars a year? 10 to 1, right? 20 to 1 even. So, you know what I mean? To hit the 12 million is like as if you're making 1 million cars. I think it's actually 20 to 1. But
if we just go by the fact that bots weigh 3% of a car, then that's every million bots. So every million vehicles is like 33 million bots.
33 to 1.
Well, if a bot is only 3% of the weight of a car, and let's just say that is your scaling limit, which it's not. It's not all about weight. It's more than that. But if we use that as our limit to scale, if you can make 1 million vehicles, then you should be able to make 33 million bots.
Well,
yeah, actually, on that one, Cern, if you look here at the numbers, we're doing 6.8 million run rate in 2029, and that's heavily sandbagged. So we're doing 7 million cars and only 12 million bots.
So that's 7 million cars is 233 million bot equivalents.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why I wasn't so concerned about your 127 jump. But anyways, the point being that even if you stick a 12 million bots, you're already at $12,433 per share. What is the market cap of that?
The easy way to do that is this. Well, let's multiply by 3,300,000,000, 41 trillion. Which is 10 trillion higher than what we had before. Let me just check in on you guys, make sure you're all still here. That's 10 trillion higher than the 30 trillion target by 20. Well, they didn't talk about when the 30 trillion would happen. ARC did, 5 to 8 trillion by 2029. So we have that as a benchmark, but I do believe there's a lot more value and a lot more units in the bots.
Yeah.
Agree?
Oh
And
yeah,
you're
no.
very quiet.
I think no. The reason why didn't they say that the reason why we did not add the bots in this analysis is because the numbers get nutty. They
Real
purposely they're probably going to do, and I know that they are researching the bots, and separately they'll probably come up with its own analysis for that. This is really focused on Robotaxi, and they want to just keep it clean. So the numbers get nutty, and here we are showing things that are very nutty.
Yeah, but again, one of the things that is interesting is going back to if we look at the factors in the auto, that in the original model is 1.839, which is the amount of units in 2023, 40% growth rate. And that's being compressed by 10% every year. So getting to that number of vehicles of, what do we say, 6.8 million, it's not beyond the realm. But again, if they do one car, can they do 10 bots? If that's the case, we're talking 70 million bots here. So what would that number be then, as a thought experiment amongst ourselves? What did you say about the amount of metal in a bot? It's CERN.
It's about 3% of the weight of the Model 3.
So then, for every car you make, using just weight of metal, would that mean 33 bots?
Well, except that Elon did say, right? Yes, you can use weight, but complexity per weight is a lot more per size, right? It's a lot more. So you can't just do the 33.
I think
half it.
You run into chip scaling and actuator scaling limits, probably relatively, that's going to be the main challenges that they're going to have to overcome. And on that time frame, I think it will also, because they can make that many of them, there definitely is a business case to go ahead and make them, even if they're not all fully useful yet. But the ceiling on how useful you can make these bots based on the quality of the AI over that period of time, I know that Elon is extremely optimistic on the capabilities of AI over the next 5 years. I am less optimistic than he is on that. And I think that, just conservatively, it's highly likely that we won't have bots that are smart enough to be useful in the hundreds of millions of units on that time frame, because the quality of the AI is good, but not necessarily that good. But that could also be not the case. And so that's one of those wild card factors in all of this that makes it hard to have confidence in numbers like that, even though the physical complexity is definitely within the realm of feasibility.
Okay, so taking it back, sandbagged, conservatively, if we do 2 bots for every car that Tesla makes, we can all agree that that's achievable, and we're not going to run into limiting factors for actuators' hands, correct? Okay.
No, that should be more than I would think actuators, even 5 or more bots per vehicle.
I think my
over that
conservative
time
number
frame.
would be 10.
Yeah.
So here, just so you know, with the way this breakdown is, Robotaxi then would result. This is our old modeling, by the way. We haven't brought this forward, although we need to. Robotaxi would be worth $6,400 a share. The bots, $12,400. The combo price north of $20,000 a share by 2029, assuming this model is not outrageous.
If anything, I would suggest it's conservative.
Yeah, and this is the problem. It's like, how can you wrap your heads around something you can buy for $180 now, going to $20,000 in 5 years? It's mind-boggling. I mean, this is the challenge. So let's play devil's advocate. So say we're just crazy modelers. We're so deep in our spreadsheets we can't see the world for what it is. Give it even if you give it a 90% haircut, the numbers are still outrageous, correct? So instead of $21,000 a share, we get to $2,100, which is less than ARC's target for just Robotaxi.
Yeah, Chris Camillo is a well-known investor.
Wow.
He published his analysis, and he actually has pretty accurate numbers. And just like CERN did, CERN 6 months ago put together this analysis for robots. And then as we start talking to the robot CEOs, we found out that our numbers were actually wasn't it pretty dead on, CERN? It was actually right on. And so Chris Camillo himself has access to some of this information that these CEOs of bot companies are validating. He says that if you can make 1 million bots, Tesla specifically, Tesla makes 1 million bots, you get the $10 trillion valuation for the company.
Let's find out, just for giggles. Let's go back here when we hit 1 million bots.
Yeah, I think the difference is that we were so conservative with saying we're going to make $15,000 per year for just 3 years, right? And the reality, the potential is that, like CERN was saying, you can actually possibly charge the same amount as you would an employee, which is $100,000. I think that would be the maximum. It'd probably be 50% of that. And let's say it's 30% of that. So now you're talking about $30,000 per year, not $15,000 a year. You know, we were, and then not limited per 3 years. This is going to go on for perpetuity. You can keep replacing the parts of the bot. Anytime the arm breaks, put another arm, you know, just keep replacing
the AI5 becomes AI6 brain, etc. So anyway, back to the 1 million bots per Chris Camillo. That gets us to 2028, and that would only yield $1,300 a share. At the same time, Robotaxi is bringing in $3,000 a share. So this is interesting, because then in my mind, when I compare these numbers to ARC, just for bot, we're doing bot, ARC is doing ARC, and I replicated ARC here. That means we are way down on the bot valuation. Just like CERN said a few minutes ago, we're way too conservative.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, you've modeled Robotaxi as a fleet.
Yep.
We haven't modeled bots as a fleet, and I think modeling bots as a sale item, a one-time item, is the weakness of the model. We tried to adjust for that a little bit here by saying, okay, we'll capture 3 years worth of profits up front. But the reality is, as Herbert said, these bots will last. Yes, they will wear out, but it'll be very cheap to just replace what is wearing out and keep these bots going. So every year's production adds on to the cumulative number of bots deployed, and the cumulative revenue and profits just continue to grow.
By the way, there's 6,700 people watching live, so people are interested in this stuff across all the channels. So thank you all for coming and watching this and dealing with us. So getting back to that, CERN, if you imagine, because you also said at the beginning, as there's more abundance, as there's more bots, the price of labor will fall down. So will the cost to manufacture the bot. So will the actual ability to sell it for $30,000 if labor becomes $2 an hour instead of 15 or 20. Could that self-throttle the actual price?
It's offset by volume. So if we get into the billions and billions of bots, you know, you get to the $10 billion range, and even if you're collecting $2 an hour in revenue, the numbers are so staggeringly large, it doesn't matter.
So 1 million bots will not move the needle on average rate per hour.
No.
You need to get to hundreds of millions or $1 billion plus before that starts throttling down the below
That's
$10
my guess,
per
maybe
hour.
hundreds of millions to be conservative. But we already have a labor shortage in the world of, or maybe it's in the US, I forget what this number pertains to, but 8 or 9 million workers. Herbert perhaps you recall, is that a US number or is that a global number?
Sorry, what's that?
There's worker shortage of 8 or 9 million workers.
That's probably just US.
Yeah.
Just US. Okay, so right, and so right there you can have 10 million bots or so before you have any impact on labor rates, and then you go from there.
Other markets are way worse. Germany is way worse. Japan has a chronic issue right now. China, so it's probably 100 million people missing on the planet, maybe more, that are required. Well, anything else we want to model while we're here? I think
just one point to add to that is also remember that most of the world is moving into a demographics crisis where there's just not enough children and not enough young people to support the labor force. So especially, as healthcare needs rise for an aging population, that tends to suck up a ton of the labor force. And then if most of the young people are stuck caring for old people, then who makes all the stuff? And so, all of those challenges really just create not just a need for robotic labor, but a continually growing need for robotic labor for the next several decades.
And you don't have to feed and educate a bot for 23 years to get to the stage of being productive. It's ready out of the gate, which is another mind blowing piece of calculus you throw into this machinery.
Well,
But I think
Optimus bot won't get tired of wiping butts, and there's only so many butts that a person can wipe before they're tired of that.
The maximum that this can go is another way to look at it is the global labor market is $44 trillion per year. This is 50% of the global GDP. 50% is labor. It's the single largest market segment that there is. Now what you're doing is creating a product that can replace or augment labor. So the $44 trillion per year is how much companies are paying for it right now. So to what extent would they replace some of that with humanoid bots? It can go as high as 44 trillion per year. That's the revenue per year. Now you go, well, they're not going to pay you the same amount of money. Let's cut it in half. And they're going to only own 10%. Elon himself says, we'll just take 100 million of a billion bots per year. And the numbers get nutty. So,
yeah. And the other factor, of course, is the debasement of fiat currency as we go forward. So,
right.
As I always say to people, $1 million
money
will be pretty much nothing in 5 years, 10 years.
Yeah,
exactly. Well, I really, we've gone an awful long time. I want to thank everybody for being here. There's 7,000 people watching. It's incredible. Any final thoughts before we wrap? I think we need to, as we get more breadcrumbs, we need to revise, and I'll figure out how to turn this into a subscription model. And then we can do another stab as to, okay, if we have the a la carte menu, as I call it, for the bot, you got factory worker licenses, 25,000 a year, and then the sushi chef by night or at the weekends is 15 grand a year, and you get all these add-ons. I think that would be really interesting as well. And then really estimate the longevity and the maintenance and the service of these things, as well as potential downtime. A lot of people have talking about 4 hours downtime every 24 hours, but the rest is fully functional if they can stand on a self-conducting charger as they go forward. But the basic point is, I think, to the audience, is Tesla stock non-financial advice? Is it a no-brainer at this level? Or are we just crazy?
It's time frame. Yeah.
My
final
for
comments,
me personally, absolutely. As long as you've got the time horizons and you're not needing cash, I don't need cash in the next 10 years. So at these prices, I don't know where I would buy anything else that looks nearly as attractive.
From my perspective, not financial advice, but anytime you have an opportunity to invest in something that has the potential to create a step change in GDP, that is interesting. It's not just Tesla, but any company that has the ability to contribute to that step change in GDP, that would make for an interesting investment.
Exactly. And even just robotaxis alone can contribute so much to GDP. And I think ARC, they had an analysis once where they spoke about the time saving, the ability for people to be productive in the back of their car while the car is driving them, to be able to work or be on conference calls or do demos or something. That's also a huge contributing factor to GDP. So well said, sir. Herbert, thank you so much. Hope to be back on your show soon too. And Hans,
yes, please.
Let's keep up the great work around all things AI. And again, brilliant minds, super interesting. I was hoping you guys would kind of dampen down the expectations for the stock price. Instead, that didn't work at all. In fact, we've proven that just even at double the production rate, the big takeaway for me from this whole video, this whole exercise, just 2x the volume of vehicles in 2028 or 2029, give or take a year for fudge factor, is totally achievable. And even at very compressed amounts per bot and revenue per bot, the numbers are completely bonkers. So that's my takeaway.
Well,
So-
and it goes back to CERN's point about it's a new class of product that you are selling a product with intelligence inside. And that is a product category that has not existed. And that is why these numbers look and feel so nutty and so insane. But
Yeah,
that's
that's what people miss, Hans. And I'm glad you said that towards the very end. Frame for me, any one of you here, if we go back to the history of mankind and all the different revolutions, from fire in a cave to steam engines to cars to computers to the internet, how much bigger is this AGI, this humanoid robot revolution? How much bigger? From what I see, it's the biggest thing to ever hit mankind. Would you all agree?
From my perspective, we've never had devices that were intelligent before without humans. So even a smartphone, as smart as a smartphone is, it needs a human for it to be useful and productive. What we're talking about is building machines, whether it's a car, a robot, or something else, that has intelligence built into it. Right? It can operate autonomously. Right, and that, as Hans said, it's an entirely new class of product that we've never seen before. So that's why it's so difficult to wrap our minds around this. But what is the value? Like, if your smartphone could autonomously do work for you, how much would it be worth? It'd be worth way more than the $1,000 that you pay for it.
Is anybody at today still doubt the superintelligence that's on its way? Here, what we're talking about is not only superintelligence, but in a superhuman form factor.
Mm-hmm.
So is there anything bigger than that? Or unfortunately replacing humans? So
yeah, it's again, one thing I just urge the audience is really spend the time to wrap your heads around exponentiality, because it'll make a big difference. As long as you got the time, as Hans correctly said, it's like, we don't know if it's going to hit 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, but something's going to give. And to be on the right side of that will be very meaningful. Thank you all. Amazing show. I don't even know how long we've gone.
Thanks, James.
But an hour and a half plus. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. It's been great.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
so much. And keep up the good work, everybody. See you all later. And thank you to the mods in the chat and everybody who attended. Bye-bye.